Hi guys. In this video, I'd like to talk to you about Ludwig Wittgenstein, okay, and some interesting things about his life, about his early life in particular. So, when we look at different philosophers, I mean, most of them lived pretty dull, uninteresting lives, for the most part. If you look at, I don't know, Kant, Spinoza, Aristotle, I mean, they were academics, had pretty unremarkable lives, but, some philosophers had incredibly interesting, turbulent, surprising lives. Okay, and Wittgenstein was definitely of the latter type. Okay, he was, um, lived an incredibly fascinating life. Okay, so first of all, he comes from one of the richest, families in Austria. Okay, so his father was a steel magnate, kind of like Krups in Germany. uh, he essentially owned, most of the steel, production. He owned it. So, whenever, the government needed, like let's say 500, I don't know, tons of steel to build a bridge or something, they would contract him, the older Wittgenstein. So, um, Ludwig Wittgenstein was born into a large family. There were many Wittgensteins. I don't remember how many, like five, I think. One of them became a great pianist, and it's kind of incredible that he was playing concert, piano with just one arm. Okay, so Paul Wittgenstein, became a great piano player, and they were pretty talented people. Wittgenstein's. So his siblings, they were pretty accomplished, in other fields, and Ludwig was the only philosopher in the Wittgenstein family. And he had a sister. They were not all men. So he was very, very talented from an early age. He had great, talent for sciences and mathematics, and he actually wanted to study engineering, physics under Ludwig Boltzmann, one of the greatest physicists in the area of thermodynamics. Okay, if you study, kind of thermodynamics, uh, Boltzmann, was one of the central people, together with Maxwell and Clausius, one of the major theoreticians in thermodynamics. And Wittgenstein wanted to, get a PhD under his supervision. And tragically, Boltzmann committed suicide at that time. So this was around 1908. So, kind of one of those interesting what ifs of history. Like, what if, Boltzmann did not commit suicide then? Perhaps Wittgenstein would have become a great physicist of the 20th century, like sort of, people like Heisenberg, Schrodinger, those quantum mechanics, uh, great physicists. Maybe Wittgenstein would have become one of them. Maybe he would have discovered incredible physics, had Boltzmann not committed suicide, kind of one of those interesting what ifs. But tragically, Boltzmann died, and Wittgenstein decided to go to Cambridge and study engineering. Just in Cambridge, and he did it for just like 2 years, and then he met Bertrand Russell and decided to switch to philosophy. And as a young man, when he was like 23, he wrote his famous book called philosophical Tractatus logico-philosophicus. Okay, very intimidating, challenging little book. It's pretty small, like 70 pages. You can read it in just one night, but it's so damn hard. Like, it's just confusing, cryptic. Um, and in this book, essentially Wittgenstein lays out a theory of logical atomism. So he kind of followed in Russell's footsteps here, and tried to essentially build a philosophical system in which you can precisely describe reality with a mathematical sort of logical language. Okay, so reduce essentially have this sort of um, positivistic you can say picture of the world, which can be described with a logically 100% valid philosophical language. Okay, I know it kind of sounds a bit vague. So essentially, we have facts on of the world, and Wittgenstein doesn't say that the world is made out of objects; it's made out of facts. Okay, so facts are the atoms of the world essentially, and you can describe them using propositions of mathematical logic. Okay, so this work was already started by Frege and Russell, and Wittgenstein essentially says that at the most fundamental level, the world is a series of facts, and those facts can be described with propositions. Okay, and based on that, he builds a pretty confusing picture about sort of facts and different levels of facts, and gives sort of theories about what mathematics is and is not, what metaphysics is and is not, and he concludes his Tractatus by saying where you cannot speak, thou should remain silent. Okay, and a lot of confusion kind of came out of this cryptic sentence, which concluded his Tractatus. And logical positivists, I'll make a separate video on these guys. The so-called Vienna Circle, they thought that this means that you cannot talk about metaphysics, religion, sort of things that continental philosophy liked talking about essentially. Uh, don't talk about metaphysics. Okay, that's what they thought Wittgenstein meant. But Wittgenstein actually meant, he did value religion and metaphysics. He thought it's, very important. Aesthetics, arts, religion. They cannot be described with his, kind of precise logical language, but they matter, and they're not nonsense. They're actually, in a sense, above, our kind of they're higher. Like positivists, they thought that arts, aesthetics, they're just nonsense. They're to be thrown out. But Wittgenstein actually thought that they're very important, but they cannot be described with his kind of logical, atomistic, language, and you should be, silent. But it's important part of our lives. And his later philosophy, in a sense, comes out of this one, misinterpretation of his of this sentence, about you should be silent where you cannot speak. So that's essentially Wittgenstein's early philosophy in a nutshell.